we're here to try and show you, share with you our love of languages. So Alana teaches Spanish, I teach French, okay? And this first slide you can see now on the screen is actually an illustration of what it is to be able to speak languages, because those pictures were actually taken by our students when they do their year abroad. Because when you study a language, you do a degree not in 3 years, but in 4 years usually, okay? And you spend a year abroad. On that year abroad, you can go to any of the language that speak the languages we teach, okay? So here in the picture, you've got some from Spain, for example. You've got some from Paris here. That's Versailles. That's Paris Town Hall. Here you've got a former student in front of the Pyramid del Sol in Mexico City, near Mexico City. Here you've got a bit of Germany. That's Nice in the south of France. That's China, obviously. This is in Spain as well. There you go. Why is it important to learn languages? Well, first thing, because if you want to be able to visit those sites, you don't want to rely on a guidebook, okay? In 2019, I went to Argentina. In all the books, it was written, avoid the area of the football stadia, especially on football games, because there is violence, there is a bit of racketeering. It could be dodgy areas. Guess what? I was going to Argentina to watch football. So I basically went to all the places that the guidebook recommended not to go to. If I had not spoken Spanish, could not have done that. See? You don't have to rely on anyone's opinion. My opinion, my travel, my language. You see? That's the first part, which is very important. Okay? Alana, for the second, we'll give you more reasons for languages.
Yeah, thanks, Cyril. And just to add to that, speaking the language of the country you're going to means you're not having to rely on the guidebook, as Cyril said, and that you actually can tune into the local knowledge. So you can sort of find your way while you're there, get the latest information and also build rapport, talking to people in their own language. What was it? The quote by Nelson Mandela, speak to a man in another language and you'll speak to his head, but talk to him in his own language and you'll speak to his heart. And that's relevant for, if you're thinking about learning a language, continuing a language learning for your career, for your professional development. I mean, we're going to talk to you quite specifically about the value of languages and employability, but it really goes beyond, you don't just have to do a degree in languages and cultures. Hopefully lots of you are thinking about that and you're taking this pathway and you're in this session because, that is an option on the table. But, the value of languages goes beyond the expected pathways that, the usual outcomes for a languages and cultures degree, or people have heard you're probably thinking, well, what can I do beyond language teaching and translating? We're going to talk to you about, 10, 15, 20 different sort of areas you can apply those skills. So this is all about the value of languages and cultures for you as individuals, but also for us as a wider society. Even if you decide not to take languages and cultures degree, your language learning will be valuable to you in other ways, in other sectors. Because, speaking a language, it's not just about, it's about what makes us human, isn't it? That it's an integral part of our identities. So that goes back to what Cyril was saying about travel, tuning into local knowledge, that sort of thing. So why learn a language? They're transformative. We can't transform the world without speaking languages. Languages are how we shape not just human connections, but our economies. Our economies are based on the world economy, our local economies, all based on the local languages. For example, if you're wanting to build a supply chain, and you need to start, the beginning of that supply chain is somewhere on the other side of the world. How do you think you begin to extract the mineral from the ground? You need to talk to the local community, build those local connections about how to do that, and then be able to establish and build that supply chain and those communications back between that context, that country, that location back to where you're working from. So establishing those connections, you can't do that by speaking just English. If you want to extract, you want to transform, you want to sell. Thinking about the EU, obviously that's probably our most obvious context, even though we're no longer a member, the Great Britain is no longer a member of the European Union. They're still one of our biggest trade partners. So thinking about tariffs, import and export, the demands for compensation, lots of those companies don't want to trade in English. One of our biggest trading partners is France. You're not going to be able to build those connections without speaking French, because who do you think a French business person is going to want to do business with? Is it going to be someone who they have to translate everything into English, or have to go through a third party, or where that communication is sort of limited in some way? Or is it going to be the person who speaks in the local language, in French, and who can not just share information, but build that rapport, build that connection? Take another example, diplomacy. Think about Putin and Zelensky. If they sit down at the table and they're trying to end this war, how do you think they're going to sign the peace talks, in German or French? Even if there are negotiators from France, from Germany, from the US, no chance. They will need the people who will facilitate that communication the best will be the people who speak Russian, Ukrainian, their languages. I'm going to hand over to Cyril.
Okay, just to reinforce what Alana was saying here, imagine that you're in your hometown, okay, at the weekend, and you see a person who seems to be lost, okay? And when you approach this person, because you're nice people, you want to help, the person, without any warning, just goes, ah ouais, excusez-moi, je suis complètement perdu, je cherche mon hôtel, vous pouvez m'aider, s'il vous plaît? Merci. There you go. I'm pretty sure that most of you would not be very willing to help this person. Whereas if this other person who is also lost in your city center, it's very popular this weekend, okay? And you approach and you go, hi, can I help? And the guy goes, oh, hello, me look for hotel. Where hotel, please help. Me lost. You can hardly say that this person, English is absolutely fine, okay? There is an accent, okay? And the grammar was far from perfect. But I'm sure that most of you, if we were in a room, if I ask you, put your hand up, if you are willing to help this person, most of you would help the second person, not the first one. Why is that? Because of the language they tried to speak. And this perfectly illustrates what Alana was saying. In business, it's the same. If you speak the language, people will be more willing to help. Okay? And that leads us to a lot of other qualities that are developed by linguists. For example, I'm also fairly sure that in most classes you've been attending since you were in year one, you've been asked to listen, to be quiet, and basically to keep quiet. Okay? I'm also fairly sure that when you started the language classes, you were encouraged to speak, and you are still encouraged to speak, especially when you do pair work. But whenever you do a listening, whenever your teacher asks you a question, I am sure that you will try to answer in the target language. This is a quality, this is a skill for life. Many people are unable to speak aloud in front of a group of people. Not only can you do it in front of a class, but you can actually do it in a foreign language. This is not something that a company can teach you. A company can teach you to use a software. A company cannot teach you an essential skill like talking in public. Linguists can do it. And this goes with presentation skills there. Teamworking. You'll ask, we've got someone who comes from the private company, a professional person there. I'm sure that we can ask this person a bit later if he has any position in his company where teamworking is not essential. And guess what? Teamworking, that's what we do in languages. We always do teamworking for everything in class, because when you speak to someone. When you listen to someone. When you write, you've got a destination, you've got someone to write to. Everything is teamwork, okay? Interpersonal skills, it's the way you interact with people. Again, as linguists, you know that you need to look at the person to talk. There are people who are very, very good in their job, but very bad at communicating, very bad at interpersonal skills. Can you imagine now if I started using my mobile phone here? Okay, I'm checking my Facebook, by the way. Okay, would that be very professional? No. Can you imagine if I was looking at my second screen here, not looking directly at the camera? That wouldn't be professional either. Okay? But this is something you know, because when you talk to someone, you look at them. And that's what you learn when you prepare for your oral, for example, for your GCSE oral, for your A-level oral, you will need to address an examiner that you may not know. And it doesn't matter, because you know what you can do. You know your presentation skills. You know your interpersonal skills. Now, some of you may think, well, languages, it's not really for me. It's too difficult. Okay. I am sure that if I could see you, and if I ask you, do you think you can become bilingual by just attending 2 or 3 hours a week at school? Fairly sure that not many people would put their hand up. If you had, on the other hand, a complete new reform on teaching languages, and you had 20 hours a week of language, doesn't matter which language, I am also fairly certain that a lot of you would put their hand up if I ask you, could you become bilingual now? And you know what? The school is not going to offer those 20 hours, unfortunately. Okay? They will be able to support you, to give you the input. You have to do the hard work. When you learned English, I guess your mother tongue for most of you here, it was that easy for you. All the hard work was on your parents. They're the one who had to repeat the same word 50 times a day. They're the one who did the repetition, the drilling, the correction. Well, guess what? If you want to learn a language, that's what you have to do. And if you do that, believe me, you'll be able to speak as many languages as you want. Doesn't matter how old you are when you start. Okay? Back to you, Alana.
Thanks, Cyril. So we've got 5 minutes left, so we're going to give you a bit of a whistle-stop tour through a bit more around careers and degrees. So what do language graduates do? So I mentioned the two areas that we're probably all familiar with, but actually the above is specific to, this slide is specific to language students who graduated in 2021, so the data's always got a bit of a lag on it, but it shows their destinations 15 months after graduation and the top 10 professional jobs they were in. So you can see that teaching was a popular option, but it's not the only one. They find themselves in a much wider range of careers. Particularly prevalent are marketing, PR, various business operations, human resources, sales management, finance roles as well. We sometimes we often invite employers back to speak to our students, and a few messages, well, one message in particular which struck with me it stuck with me from a marketing company was, we really like languages and cultures graduates because we can teach them the soft skills of marketing, but we can't teach them the multilingual skills, how to speak in the other language, in other languages. Back to Cyril for this one.
Okay, here we've illustrated what you can do in so many fields. So here you've got some actors, you've got well, 3 actors and actually 2 football players, okay? I particularly like the example of Pep Guardiola, because not only was he a good footballer and has changed into a great coach, look at how many languages he speaks, okay? And on top of the French, Italian, German, Spanish, and Catalan, of course, there is English, which is not his mother tongue. And we could have added Arabic, because he actually speaks a little bit of Arabic after playing a few years in Saudi Arabia. Okay. Next slide, Alana. And look at the languages which are the most in demand. You've got French, German, Spanish, Italian, and Mandarin Chinese. And guess what? Back to Alana for the next slide, where what languages do we teach?
So of those top languages which are most in demand, we teach all of them. We teach here at Lancaster, we have Spanish, German, French, Chinese, and Italian. We sit in the School of Global Affairs. So, you know, we've been talking a lot about languages, but you also do deep learning on a languages and cultures degree about the cultures, the contexts in which those languages are spoken. You know, going back to the example of Putin and Zelensky, it's not enough to just speak the language, but you need to understand the history of those countries and where the conflict has come from. Um, the culture, the people, the norms, the behavior, all of that comes through both the language teaching, but the teaching isn't just the language, it's the culture as well. And that sits nicely in the global affairs. Because our focus is very much interdisciplinary. We teach languages, but we bring the teaching of those languages together in various contexts. We do very well in the league tables, and our teaching is research focused. We do research-led teaching, which again speaks to the cultural aspect. And yeah, Cyril, you say the bit about social media.
Yes. So on the right-hand slide, it's something very important, and a piece of advice that I actually give you from my middle age height. Basically, when you're interested in working in a company or studying in a university, not specifically Lancaster, but for example, Lancaster, follow them on social media, because then you will have the real view of what it is like to study there or to work there. Okay?
Yeah, and do your research, because we have our particular approach to studying languages and cultures, which may or may not be for you, but do your research about how those degrees at different places that you're interested in, how they teach those, what the specialisms are. I think we've run out of time, but we'll just finish perhaps on one or two slides about our degrees to give you an example of the sort of thing you can do.
So here you've got the different degrees we have. So we've got what we call the M-Lang, which is a master integrated into a degree. So you start with a degree, and after 3 years, you complete your degree, including a year abroad. The second year is abroad, and then you move on straight away onto a master. But the recruitment there, as you can see, is quite difficult because it's a very, very challenging and very rewarding program. Okay, our second program is the BA for languages and global culture. Okay, and with those two, you can do a combination of 4 core languages that we offer: Chinese, French, German, and Spanish, and the discovery language, which is Italian. Okay, so you can start at the beginner's level or at the advanced level. Okay, beginners, intermediate. Okay, so let's say up to GCSE, you would be beginners, intermediate, a bit of revision, and then you move on. And if you do the advanced one, it's after the A level. Okay, now Lancaster has got something very specific that you will see on the next slide. Okay, we've got a mix of discovery languages. Okay, and when you arrive in Lancaster, okay, you can do a core language at the advanced level and a discovery language in year 1. At the end of the year 1, you can start a new discovery language in the second year. Or you can keep the same language, okay, and then go on your year abroad, the third year, the one I mentioned before. And then when you come back from your year abroad, you can actually have a new discovery language, okay? Or across the whole degree, you could have 2 core languages, okay? The interesting part in what we've done in Lancaster with languages is that you're not stuck to one program per year, which means that, for example, if you want to start a new language when you're in your final year, in 4th year, you can actually start a new language, which means that you will be with first-year student and second-year student. Okay, and this is something really very specific in Lancaster, because you can start, basically the languages are per level, they're not per year. And this is really rare. Back to you, Anana.
Yeah, thanks, Cyril. And just to reiterate that point about, this may be for you or something else may be for you. So do your research and look around, because depending on where you are in your language learning journey and how you'd like to develop that and sort of what pathways you'd like to take, there's a very wide range of degrees out there as much as there are careers. I'm going to skip a few slides. I'm just going to finish on this final slide, which I think is a really nice visual of an example of where students in our, not just in our subject, but in our School of Global Affairs and in our faculty, which houses creative industries, social sciences and law as well, and just the intersection between all those different pathways, all those different careers. So you can see the possibilities are endless and multiple, and you don't have to know where you want to go with this now, but many doors will be open to you with languages and cultures. And I think we can finish there, Cyril.
Yeah.
What do you think?
Thank you. Yeah, that's perfect.
That's absolutely excellent. Thank you, Cyril and Alana. That's been really informative. And actually, that last slide, I think, speaks volumes about the application of that beautiful learning that students do, but in the cultural context and in the employability context as well. That is a really good visual to have ended on. Students, if you'd like to put any questions to Alana and Cyril in the chat function, that's great. I did have a couple of questions that were asked beforehand, but I'd like to hand over, if I may, to Will, and if you could stop presenting, that's brilliant. And thank you, Alana, and ask Will to come online and to present, and then we'll kind of see if there are some questions that students have. As I say, I did have some in advance, but it's really interesting to talk to Will now and learn from him about the application, particularly as he sees it in employment terms, and then we'll come back and talk to everybody. Thank you very much indeed, Will. I'll go off camera now as well. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Louise. Right, so I'm just going to share my screen. Okay, so if everyone can just let me know you can see that.
Yes,
that's
it's
perfect.
Okay, brilliant. So yeah, what I wanted to talk to you today is a little bit about showing you the example of my journey, of how I sort of ended up in a job where I do use my careers, my languages, and it very much sort of rings true with what the previous speakers were discussing as well. So just to start off, so I work for, as Louise says, a company called Hydrobolt. It's the full name is Lone Star Fasteners Hydrobolt, as we've taken on a merge to another company, and I'm currently the export sales manager here. We're a company that employs 440 people here in the UK in the West Midlands. We're based in Wednesbury, and we're part of a global group which employs about 2,500 people, and we have a turnover globally of about 250 million pounds. So yeah, I'm going to talk through a little bit about my journey and what my particular company, how we touch with the use of languages and communication in professional roles, and then touch base back on sort of what's important and what we look for when we're recruiting. So just to sort of take it back to a little bit about what the guys from Lancaster University were talking about. My journey is sort of quite similar to what they were discussing. So I studied at sixth form languages. So I did Spanish, history and Latin. I completed my A-levels in 2002, and I went to Birmingham University where I studied Spanish and Portuguese. So from my side, I'd always enjoyed languages. obviously at GCSE, I've done science, I've done maths, I've done different humanities, but I'd always really enjoyed the communication element of speaking a language, and that was the main reason why I decided to take it into my university degree. It's obviously quite an open-ended degree to do, and that sort of appealed to me because I didn't have an idea at that stage as to which career I was going to take. Part of that that university degree did include time studying abroad. So I spent the academic year 2004-2005 living in the south of Spain. Again, completely immersed into a foreign country where there was very little sort of British culture. Very few people spoke English at the time, so it was, as I say, complete immersion into a place where I had to fully speak the language, integrate with local people, and I found that to be a fantastic opportunity and something that really helped me develop as a person and in my linguistic ability. I graduated from Birmingham University in 2006, and then 2007, following year, was when I started full-time employment. So, you know, that there's some of the skills below that you can see that I picked up during my studies. So obviously communication, organisation, time management, motivation. So one thing I think is really important to sort of emphasize about languages and language degrees, you know, that they are not vocational skills. That doesn't take you down the route of a specific job, but all of those skills are transferable to take you forward into any career in the future. So that's one thing that for me personally, it was a really enjoyable degree that allowed me to develop and prepared me for quite an open-ended onwards journey in my career. So following my my graduation from university, first of all, I worked in a graduate placement with a project management company, which I did for 6 months over a fixed term, and that was something straight out of university, just to get into a sort of a professional role. I was fortunate to work very closely with experienced professionals, and I picked up a lot and I learned a lot during that initial first placement that I was in. So there was no languages involved in that role. But then my first full-time role, which I started in January 2007, was a Spanish-speaking junior sales executive. So I was really keen, following my my degree, to find a job where I would be speaking Spanish as much as possible. So I didn't know if I was going to enjoy working in sales. I didn't know if it would be something that I would be good at, but I was just looking for a career where you know, I would be able to speak Spanish and use my language, because that was one of the things I enjoyed doing. So that involved me moving to North Yorkshire. The company was a distribution company, fairly small, with about 60 employees, and it was a sort of in at the deep end sort of thing, where from day one I was given a telephone and I was told, you know, here's a list of companies in Spain. We want you to call them. So it was in at the deep end, but it turned out to be a fantastic opportunity. So I was working closely with two Spanish salespeople. I spent the whole day during this job speaking in Spanish to my colleagues, speaking in Spanish to customers, and then I made close friendships with the people I worked with. So I ended up in the evenings as well, hanging out with these people and speaking Spanish, which obviously then drove the improvement in my Spanish, and then that helped me to do the job better, and you know, get a lot more out of it. So it was a fantastic opportunity that obviously without that level of language ability to start off with, that came from my university degree and my time abroad, I never would have been able to have accessed that. So it was a fantastic first role that I found, and as I say, it was a bit of a leap of faith, because it was moving into an industry I'd never worked in, first full-time job, moving house, quite far away from where I was from. But something that I look back on, and I'm very proud that I made that decision, and it set the path for the rest of my career. After 3 years, I moved to another company, again, Spanish sales executive, but into a different industry. This time it was the oil and gas sector, and it was a slightly larger company. But by then, having had 3 years working as a sales executive selling in Spanish, I sort of knew what the job entailed. I knew how to do it. I developed my own style, shall we say. So I was confident to move into a larger company where obviously the budgets were higher, the number of employees was greater, so there was a little bit more pressure, but I was confident to make that step. So I would call that my main career, because that company that I joined in 2010, I'm still there now. And I've last year completed 15 years service in the role. So where I'm working now, Lone Star Fasteners Hydrobolt, we are a UK manufacturer of critical oil and gas components. So one thing that I think surprised me at the time is that, yes, the UK does still have a manufacturing industry. You know, I think in general, we would say that we're more of a service economy now, but there's still a hotbed, especially in this area in the West Midlands, of manufacturing companies which are exporting all around the world. So in 15 years, I've seen a lot of change in the market, a lot of change in the company where I work. So in the oil and gas industry, we've seen global recessions. We've seen huge drops in the oil price, which leads to our work drying up. Obviously, COVID, which was a period of nearly 2 years of working from home, which for a manufacturing company is very difficult, because day-to-day conversations with engineers, with with machinists is very difficult when you're not on the actual site. We've been through changes in ownership, so the sale of the company to private equity. And my role has changed as well during this time, during the 15 years in the business. So when I started, as you can see in the bottom graphics, I started in this company as a sales executive looking after a budget of £1 million in a company of £15 million turnover. I was then given a team to manage with a budget of £3 million as the company grew to 20 million. And then as I developed and was given more opportunities, my team got larger, my budget got larger. It became as much a role of managing upwards, so dealing a lot with the CEO, the MD, as it did managing my team, and that obviously brings more challenges and more development. A new management structure came in, and we, as part of a change in ownership, we became part of a global group. So then, rather than dealing with a site based in Wednesbury in the West Midlands, we are now a company which has manufacturing locations all around the world. We have 18 manufacturing locations in America, in the Far East, in the Middle East, in Europe. So the role has really developed, and now I'm a global role. So on a daily level, I'm communicating, liaising, working with colleagues who are based all around the world. And now, rather than having started at looking after £1 million in 15 million, I'm now looking after £20 million in a £250 million company. So it's been a fantastic journey. It's taken me to many different countries. So chiefly speaking Spanish. I've been several times to Spain and Latin America. So over the last 15 years, I've been probably more than 5 times a year. So I've been on business trips to Spain literally hundreds of times. I've been to Latin America over 20 times. And then as part of managing a team of language speakers, it's taken me to many other countries. So last week I was in Germany. Next week I'm going to Italy together with some of my colleagues to visit customers, to find new markets, to develop our existing relationships. So, but still to this day, even though I am managing a team, I speak Spanish every single day, and it's one of the things that I enjoy the most about the job, and it's one of the things that gives me the most satisfaction as well. So my current role, having been on that journey, is European and Latin American Business Development and Sales Manager. So I'm managing 10 people who work for me in this team, which is responsible for £20 million of sales on a yearly basis. As you can see, I've got many different languages spoken within my team: Portuguese, French, Spanish, Italian, German, and Turkish. And all of the people who work for me have worked to degree level. They've been through the university system. So many of them are English, some of them are from other countries, but they all speak. They've all ended up working in this company, and have moved to the UK or are from the UK because of their languages, and languages has really opened the door to the roles that they've had. I also have 2 apprentices who work in the team who took A-levels at King Ed's as well, who, again, I'm working closely with those to teach them and to sort of help mold them into future salespeople who are going to contribute to the growth of the future business. So we are a company that is growing. We have 440 employees, which is the largest headcount that we've actually had in the time that the company's existed. So we're really at a top growth moment. Our yearly revenue is around £65 million, and obviously that contributes a lot to the local economy. Of the 65 million turnover that we have, around 50 million of it is exported. And that's one of the things that really satisfies me. Obviously, we have lots of local supply chains, so we manufacture critical components, but we also use a lot of local suppliers for ancillary processes. So it does generate a lot of business for the local community. So my team grows. I've recently recruited 2 new people who work for me who speak Spanish and Portuguese, and some of the key things that I look for in my recruitment process is enthusiasm, positivity, people who are able to retain information, people who have good timekeeping. In the sales sector, a lot of the experience can be gained over time. So we can develop somebody's technical knowledge. We can give people training in different sales techniques and strategies, but their values are really important. And I believe a lot of these values, positivity, planning, enthusiasm, will come from studying languages, because that is a lot of the transferable skills that come from it. And many of the best achievers that I have within my team started off with no sales experience. I myself started off with no sales experience off the back of a career in languages, and just took those raw skills that I've developed at university that were transferable, and just took them and managed to sort of generate this career, which I've found very satisfying, very rewarding. So just some of the key takeaways that I wanted to share from sort of my experiences as a language speaking professional is that, if you had have asked me when I left university what my career pathway would be, I wouldn't have had a clue. I couldn't have said, but I would have told you that I definitely wanted to use my languages, and I wanted to have a job that involved communication with people. So I'm really lucky that I've got a career which utilises the skills, because it sounds like a cliche, but if you enjoy your job, it doesn't feel like work, and I would definitely say that's the case for me. So taking a call from a customer in Spain that I've dealt with for 10 years plus, and talking as much about their day-to-day life as I talk about business is something I really enjoy. Making a cold call to a company who I've never dealt with before and who doesn't know me, but finding a way, using my language, using my skills to generate an opportunity, again, is something I really enjoy doing. Some of the job pathways that you may end up taking, you might not know exist. So if somebody had said to me, do you know that there's one of the largest manufacturers of critical oil and gas products is in Wednesbury, and it's one of the largest in Europe, I wouldn't have known. I wouldn't have known to apply for it. So there's lots of jobs out there that could be fantastic and really well suited that you just have to look out and see what there are. A lot of what I've done is from being outside of my comfort zone and stretching myself and finding that when you step outside your comfort zone, you may feel like you are, shall we say, you know, it's something that's not easy to do, but when you do it, that's when you're developing the most. So when you're stretching yourself and pushing yourself, that's the time that you develop the most. Obviously, these communication skills are transferable to lots of different careers, and the languages open the door to lots of opportunities. And as well as that, on top, working hard, being on time, are also non-negotiables that would help you to progress. So that's everything from me, and I'm open to any questions you may have.
Well, that's fantastic. Thank you very much indeed. And I think it shows, I don't know, Alana and Cyril, if you're happy to come back online, that would be great. And students to put any questions in the chat. It's really great to see that combination, I think, of the learning side of things and the social aspect and the global affairs and the familiarity with the culture, and how that then becomes applied into perhaps some uncharted territory where you obviously had no intention when you started off at university of going into that sort of sector, but actually develop those language skills. Cyril and Alana, can I just ask you, I'm just going to check in the chat whether we've got anything coming in, but I have got some pre-asked questions, and I guess for everybody, including Will here, the introduction of AI is on a lot of people's kind of lips here. And I mean, I know very obviously that there is a huge place for those interpersonal skills, the cultural aspect as well as languages. But Alana and Cyril, I wonder if you could sort of just give some reassurance and perhaps an outline of how that might have influenced teaching and learning from a university perspective.
Okay, I'll go first. Alana, if you want to add something after. So languages are something, as Will perfectly explained in his career, that you cannot learn like that in 5 minutes. It's a long-term engagement, and you need the passion usually to do languages, okay? Because it will open doors, but you need the key, okay? And the key is the language. That's really important. Now, when it comes to languages, for example, and the use of AI, there are ways of including AI. AI is not the enemy. AI is there to help you, but you have to know how to use it. AI to check a written piece, for example, can be useful. AI to write the piece for you is completely useless. It will make mistakes, and your teachers will spot it, by the way. Okay, so don't try it. And your boss will also spot it, by the way, in the future, because AI will make mistakes. Where AI is useful is when it can actually assist you. It's a new tool, like you used to have a dictionary, like I use word reference in my lessons. If students, when we do a translation, give me a word that I don't know, I'm not even ashamed of saying, hold on, wait a minute, I need to check that. Okay, and that's where AI is. It's a time saver. Okay, it may give you ideas, yes, but it will never replace people being able to speak. Okay, because you should not trust it 100%. There will always be someone checking. If not, you may end up, and that's an example I gave in presentation before. There was a British paper that wanted to tease the French during the Football World Cup in 2022 before the game France-England. Okay, and they had a portrait of the French players, Kylian Mbappé and a few others, switching to King Kyle instead of Le Roi Kylian, King Kyle, etc. All that, no problem. It all went fine until they actually spent a lot of money on saying it's coming home and translating it very badly, probably using AI by il rentre à la maison, ILS, rentre with ENT, which, as some of you will know if you do French, they are coming home. So if you wanted to tease the French by it's coming home, meaning the cup is going home, and then you've got the English players actually sat on a plane, and you write on it, they are coming home, that's a pretty funny answer, okay? Probably not what they intended to do. Alana, do you have anything else you want to add?
Yeah, I think I love that example.
Yeah.
I think what AI has is a huge wealth of knowledge, but it's important to remember what AI doesn't have, and that is consciousness and humanity. So AI cannot critically analyze a situation. It can't, we everyone's talking about STEM at the moment, but what about what it is to be human? I mean, Will's spoken really extensively about, what's a pretty technical area, but the reason he's enjoyed it so much is his personal enjoyment, the humanity of it. And I bet he wouldn't have had either that experience or those successes if he just relied on AI. AI is, I think, in the higher education sector, everyone is talking about it. Everyone is thinking through how we can work with it. And it is true that the employment landscape is changing, but the education landscape is changing and adapting as well. So it's about learning how to use it. And like Cyril said, we know we can. The reason students find it difficult to pull the wool over our eyes is because AI is unreliable. It doesn't know how to critically analyze resources. It doesn't know how to reference correctly. And honestly, you can quickly work out. Now, sometimes I can see when the students use AI to enhance their learning, and I think that's okay as well. And it's just about encouraging them not to over rely on it. So we're not telling our students not to use it. We're telling them how to use it to obtain the best result.
That's super. Well, I don't know if you have anything to add to that. I've got a couple of questions in the chat, but have you got anything to add to that in terms of your own experience?
Yeah, I mean, we are finding in our industry that a lot of our sort of key blue chip customers are trying to make some moves into AI to sort of optimize their processes. But what we say is people buy from people, and you will never be able to replace a customer who might call us and say, can you do us a favor? We need this for a certain time scale. We need your help. And people pick up the phone still and always will, because you can get that across in your voice and in your expression, and in a black and white email or a computer that is able to read forecast of usage and demand. It's never going to be the same. So yes, there are certain things that some of our customers are using, and that will filter down into the whole market to optimize the processes. But the contact from one person to another is never going to be replaced.
That's smashing. It's very reassuring, I think, as well for students to know that the world ahead of them in learning languages is very much alive and necessary and rewarding. And I think that's fantastic. Before I ask Polly's question, I'm just going to ask Edgar's question to Will. Looking back, what's one thing you wish you'd done earlier that made the biggest difference to your career using languages? Do you have one thing that you might look back on?
Yeah, I think one of the things I would say is going to Latin America. So one of the key parts of my role, and one of the things that's really sort of taken my career to the next level in terms of working internationally within my group, is that I cover Latin America for the whole of the group. So for the first 5 years that I worked in this company, I traveled a lot to Spain. I didn't travel to Latin America because there was probably a fear factor there that I thought, well, Europe is safe, Latin America less so. It felt like it was a long way away. So as I say, I stayed within my comfort zone a little bit and thought, okay, I'll keep visiting Spain, I'll keep developing Spain. And it took me about 5 years until I actually went to Latin America. My first trip was to Chile and to Venezuela. And I realized these places are they're just the same. A city is a city, people are people. And then that really sort of took the handbrake off. And then I visited Argentina, Peru, Colombia, Chile, lots of other places, Panama. And that's really taken our business to the next level, and it's taken my career to the next level. So as Cyril said, you can read guidebooks, and you can look at websites from the Foreign Office which will say don't go to these places unless it's essential, but that is actually not really the case, because people everywhere you go have their own day-to-day lives. You could go to Mexico City and people walk to work, people have day-to-day lives. So that is one thing that I think, why didn't I do that earlier? Because I would probably be in a lot different place, I say, both professionally in my development and the company in terms of the sales.
That's really helpful, thank you, and great experience to share there as well. Thank you. To Cyril and Alana, can I just ask as well? In Lancaster, you obviously have this ability to learn these newer languages as you go through the program, which I think you explained. In terms of thinking about European languages, and you've got I think, is it Chinese, and I'm sorry, I can't remember the other additional languages, global languages. How do you feel that students come into your university looking at one language and actually end up completely looking at a very different kind of language, which is not always so easy when you're thinking about European? I don't know if either of you can.
I'm going. I'll go, and then if Alana wants to complete. Well, the best example of people starting with a language and then ending up with another one is our former boss, Derek. He started university a couple of years back now with French. He picked up Chinese as a beginner, and now he speaks fluent Chinese, and he actually teaches Chinese here on the campus. And he used to be the head of department. That was his second language. And there are other examples like that. We've got, I won't say a lot, but regularly we have students who actually swap from one language to the other, or they take a beginner language, and they follow it through all the way to the last year. Each year we have in our finalist, so in the 4th year of the degree, some students who actually started that language when they arrived here.
Excellent.
Alana?
Yeah, no, including me. I was a Spanish beginner here. And
right.
Yeah, I did Spanish and psychology, thinking I'd just do Spanish as a minor for 1 year, and the rest is history.
That's really good. Couple of questions here. We'd have to be brief now because we're coming towards the end. To Will, does your job depend equally on having cultural awareness as well as language ability, or is ability more important when communicating with people? An interesting question, Alan.
Yeah, that's a great question. Cultural awareness is really important. So the amount of times, obviously, there's lots of things happening in the world, but a great example is the situation in Venezuela. So if I was to speak to somebody in Latin America, not just Venezuela, anywhere, being abreast of these situations and sort of discussing them is really important. Just to sort of to bring the relationship a lot closer. So yeah. I think that's probably even more important than being exactly correct in the language, because ultimately you want to build relationships with people. So it's very normal for me to have a look at, news articles to make sure that I'm mindful of what's going on in that country before I put a call in, and be interested in them and what's going on in their lives. So yeah, that's true.
That's really interesting, and I see that Polly did Spanish as a beginner at uni too. That's brilliant. Well, as an employer, you employ apprentices post A-level and also other staff members who have language degrees. Would you recommend either of these paths over the other one? In your eyes, what are the main differences between these two paths if people are considering ways to get into business jobs with language?
So I know people who've taken both routes. And I know people who have got to the same point taking both routes. So I think joining as an apprentice, you get a lot more experience early on. So our apprentice scheme has a process of showing apprentices every different department. So they will spend time on our shop floor, in our quality department, in our sales team, and maybe they'll find a route that suits them. But equally, coming from the university, which is obviously the route I took, you've got a lot more transferable skills at that stage to hit the ground running. So it depends on the person, but either opportunity you can end in the same destination in a key role wherever you want to go in management within a company like this.
And I guess it depends on whether somebody feels work ready or whether they want to continue to learn both academically and extensively at university, taking up the opportunities that you've mentioned, both Cyril and Alana. Last question from Demi. Which languages would you say are the most useful to learn? I guess that's an almost endless question, but I don't know if any of you have any kind of a take on that.
Yeah, I'd like to come in on this one if that's okay with Will and Cyril, because, this was kind of a thought I had when I thought, I'm going to study Spanish. The actual reason I studied Spanish was because I loved the nightlife in Mexico and Spain just before I went to uni. So it was very personal. But you think, oh, yeah, it's spoken in more than 20 countries and, it's got so many speakers. But I'd say the small languages are just as important. So, we all know that the teaching of German is really a critical point. In it's being taught less and less at A-level, but it means we have a dearth of German speakers in this country, and industry is just crying out for them. So again, we're losing hundreds of millions of pounds in our economy because we don't have enough German speakers. Also, thinking back to one of the slides we showed, Italian I think was the 4th or 5th language most in demand, and it's because I think there's a misconception that it's a small language, it won't be useful. When I worked at a translation company as a project manager, it was always really easy for me to source freelance Spanish and French translators, but the rarer the language, the higher the rate of pay. So I think there's two sides to that, and it's it's how long is a piece of string. Any and all are as valid as each other for different reasons.
I think that's really interesting, and also just to say as well that sometimes students I know do joint honours with other subjects, I think, and I know that many industries, certainly in Europe and beyond, globally, are using languages connected to those who have law experience or business experience. So actually, it's another area to consider gaining skills via work experience. Those that Will talked about about those transferable skills. It's really important to be the full package, I think, when you come to think about employability as alongside those languages, because those soft skills are really important and key to gaining those connections and future employment. We have run out of time, and Faye's been really busy in the background putting in links, and what I would encourage students to do, we're very glad that you've stayed on for the whole of this time. All of the students have actually really been paying attention, and I think it's great because we would really encourage students to go and visit Lancaster University, that in any of those that you feel where the languages are on offer, but there obviously is a very specific addition to the Lancaster programme and well worth looking at. So Faye's been putting in there the links to Lancaster University, but some general ones as well. Will, Cyril and Alana, thank you so much for presenting this evening. We will be sending around that recording, and it would be very helpful to have your presentations as well, and we can send those around. We've really encouraged students to actively engage via Polly and the languages department in all of those opportunities for work experience, for travelling abroad, for gaining more experience, and joining the universities on those open days to explore which is the best. Thank you very much indeed all for this evening. We look forward to meeting you all again online sometime soon, and thank you to the students for paying good attention as well. All the very best to everybody.
Thanks so
Thank you.
much. Thanks
Thank
everyone.
you.
Thank you.